introduce everybody. So, all right. Wow. Super. So, first of all, I want to say hello to everybody and welcome to the shindig. It says I have to say a couple words, but didn't give you very much time, which is excellent. It's what everyone wants. We have a full day today. There is, we have those posted, and you can see the little fold-out programs if you don't have one of those. And so I'm not going to kind of run down the whole thing, but just want to say that we have the full floor, and so if you need to stretch your legs, feel free to run around out there. Just don't fall down the stairs. I'm the one that gets to, like, I don't know, talk on the microphone all the time, but I have to thank very much my two co-conspirators in all this, Scott Nadelson, who programmed through the Haley Ford lecture series, Jennifer Forrester, who was here Thursday and Friday, and also secured the room for us and the floor. So very much, thank you very much. And also thank you very much, Juniper, who basically did everything but talk on a microphone. We had some sponsors we also have to thank. We had 11 anonymous donors for this, mostly people from about 99.9% people from Salem, the Salem Poetry community. David Goodrum, Life Source, Manna Bakery, Walter Moon, Stephanie Palmblad, and Colette Tennant. Very generous of all of them to help out. Okay. We have been starting off our events for this festival with some readers from Corbin University. And we're going to invite up two this morning, and we're going to start off with Noah Platts.
Good morning, everyone. I'm Noah Platts, and the poem I'm going to read today is called Escher Paints Destiny. It was written after a prompt in Dr. Tennett's class, which we were to consider having a famous artist paint us in some way. So here it is. Escher Paints Destiny. Welcome to my office. Intriguing, you say. Why, thank you. That is what I was hoping for. Now, I know your letter said you are not good with math, but don't worry, just wonder. First, I'll draw some stairs. I love stairs because on a page, you see, you don't know which end goes up or down. Watch as I turn it over. Now I'm going to sketch two men on these stairs, both walking upright or downright. You decide. Now I'll add some more archway here, archway there, and then we'll go outside to the day in a city of bubbling glass. Watch how it reaches out to you. Look at the towers, the steeples, the spires. But now our stroll comes to the sea, made of a giant chessboard. Pawns and rooks and bishops and queens zip around here and there until squares fade into the night. Made of fishes and fowls decreasing infinitely. And then nothing. Just nothing. Just a black line that danced round and round, angels and demons flying into each other, hands drawing themselves. Cavalry riding in a one-sided loop, reptiles crawling over the cover of a book, then swimming on a page. You thought it would be a straight path, did you? You thought life was a few lords, ladies, gnomes, but the twists and turns of a waterfall, If you still have questions, ask the one who paints angels.
Thank you, Noah. Savannah Bisbee is next.
All right, this was the result of a poetry club meeting at Corbett's Stinky Bagels. We had a bunch of words we had to cohesively fit into a poem in. This was my attempt. The Pilgrims digress. Sometimes I wonder about the Puritans, sitting around in their colony, tending the green sprouts of their crops. And I wonder, have they considered the coconut? The strange product of a faraway land, the means of the almond joy on my desk? No. They are whispering about the sins and scandals of their neighbor who makes muffins. It doesn't matter how delicious her muffins, or how many she sends her neighbors when they are sick. It only matters that she forgot herself that one time.
Thank you, Savannah. And another big thank you to Colette for organizing all the Corbin students to come out. It's been absolutely a treat. For that, when Juniper and I were planning this, we thought it was a good idea to have a land acknowledgement. And for that, I'd like to introduce Stephanie Lennox to come up.
Thank you. I thought this was a good opportunity to break out my ribbon skirt. I'm going to read a land acknowledgement, but before I do, I want to talk a little bit about the whole concept of the language, the land acknowledgement. There's a lot of different perspectives on it. Some people love it, some people hate it, some people think it's performative, some people think it's just the least you can do. With 574 tribes in the United States, it's very unlikely we're going to have any kind of agreement on it. So one of the things that I have done is I've written a poem that is my attempt to reclaim the land acknowledgement. It is an acknowledgement of Kalapuya land. I'm not a descendant of the Kalapuya tribe. I am from the Pokagon Band of Potawatomi, which is in the Great Lakes region. But I think it is important to reclaim the language, I keep on saying language, reclaim the land acknowledgement, recognize the complications of history, and also make visible the presence and living traditions of the people of this land. So this is a poem I wrote while I was walking through Bush Pasture Park. I have two words and phrases from Kalapuyan in this poem. I think it's important to acknowledge the language. Technically speaking, the Kalapuyan language went extinct in 1954, the spoken version of it, but descendants of the tribe are actively engaged in revival of the language, and in 2021 there was a dictionary published, and so I will just begin with the poem. This is land acknowledgement. Each old oak in the city park bears a tag on its north side, numbered as if it were a pet taught to sit or stay through the centuries. I can't miss the forest for the trees because there never was a forest. Here the people of the land set fires to clear the way for blue camas bulbs and tarweed seeds. They burned the land, Gani, Yami, Anua, for thousands of years before this park. White oaks, fire-resistant, remained, and, quote, when acorns ripened on oak leaves, and when the acorns would fall, then the women, they'd gather up those acorn, they'd gather many, put them in their soft bags, end quote. Today, the ground squirrels gather among picnic benches and trash cans, edging out the gray squirrel, called amual in Kalapuyan, the tribe's spoken language, gone extinct the year after this park was formed, named for the man who wrote of the superior white race in the local paper, who owned the local paper, who owned the local bank, who claimed to own these trees under whose canopy of history I now walk. Miigwech.
Okay, thank you very much, Stephanie. I can't see without these now. Okay. Our first speaker is Seamery Furman. She writes poetry, nonfiction, and memoir. She has published a forthcoming poetry and nonfiction in multiple journals and anthology. Seamery is an award-winning columnist and director of the Elk River Waters Workshop. She is associate director of the graduate program in creative writing at Western Colorado University, where she teaches nature writing and poetry. Seamery is the host of Terra Firma and resides in the Salmon River Mountains of Idaho with dogs and wilderness. And she has a website, seameryfurman.com. Here is Seamery.
Come on in. How are you all doing? Good? You hear me okay? No. Yeah. Well, yeah. We'll just get closer. To this. I'll let you get situated. Thank you for being here. Thank you for the introduction, Mark. Thank you for the poems. It was wonderful, and for performing them so beautifully. What a treat, Stephanie. Thank you. Jennifer, thank you for hosting me. It's so nice to be here. And thank you to the land that we're all on right now for hosting all of us, not only here today, but throughout our lives, right? Excellent. I'm going to start by inviting some friends in the room. Is that okay with you all? I'm just going to bring them in here through a window. Okay.
Is it possible to turn some of the lights down?
I bet it is. You know what I love about small groups like this? It's not stressful. We'll figure it out together and make it a conversation as much as anything. How's that? Can you see our friend? Okay. And the light's off me, which makes it even better. Perhaps it begins like this. Overture. Eagle Poem by Joy Harjo. To pray, you open your whole self to sky, to earth, to sun, to moon, to one whole voice that is you. And know there is more that you can't see, can't hear, can't know except in moments steadily growing and in languages that aren't always sound, but other circles of motion. Like eagle, that Sunday morning over Salt River, circled in blue sky and wind, swept our hearts clean with sacred wings. We see you, See ourselves and know that we must take the utmost care and kindness in all things. Breathe in, knowing we are made of all this, and breathe knowing we are truly blessed because we were born and die soon within a true circle of motion. Like eagle, rounding out the morning inside us, we pray that it will be done in beauty. In beauty. You surrender to the words, which are more than words, because they come to life inside of you. In fact, they bring something inside of you to life. And that life connects you to a larger life, or simply to life itself, a consciousness, a creator, perhaps what some will call God. But it is transcendent, and for a moment, you are neither past or present. You are in the life of the poem. You are transformed and transported. The imagination of the mind has built a stage upon which images begin to form, and in the orchestra pit, music arises. And you see what you see on the stage, and you hear what you hear in the music of the words, and in a wondrous moment of poetic magic, you are both co-creator and audience. You have fulfilled the last requirement of the poem. You have been the reader, the listener, the receiver of the gift. Prelude. Every morning I read poems aloud, to our small cabin on a hill and all it holds, to Apache, our dog person, to the trees beyond the sliding glass, and to snow and sun and various birds at the feeder or in the limbs and sky. I read to the bear, either real or imagined, who I believe is hibernating beneath our deck, and to the roots and the potential that is the trillium that is, right now, beneath 5 feet of snow. I read to the neighbors, an act of compassion, even as they often fill me with frustration, or perhaps because they do. By mowing down the native landscape, the spirea and willow that house juncos, and give cover to the small beings of this forest, who I also read to. I read to the hired help of the neighbors as they cut Douglas fir trees and lodgepole pine, and watch the nests and stores of flicker, Steller's jay, and nuthatch fall to the ground. And I read to myself. Poems in the morning, always poems, like little prayers. I read them, the fierce songs that they are. I read them like spells and sometimes hexes. I read them to cast out evil, to abate loneliness, to connect with my ancestors. I read poems as if they are recipes, and lately, I read to a pair of nesting bald eagles, which I watch on a screen of my notebook computer, a window I keep open all day. That sound of the eagles and their surroundings, embroidering into meetings and emails, dishes and duties, and 100 other things I do that make up what my culture calls a day. This morning, after meditation, I opened the window between the eagles and I opened a book of poems by Margaret Atwood. Just turn the wind down. I hear you, Wind. I know you got something to say. Thank you. Come on, down. This morning after meditation, I opened the window between the eagles and then I opened a book of poems by Margaret Atwood. As I did, Jackie turned to the camera and sang, and I took this to mean she was listening and that she, rightly so, was delighted that Margaret was going to sing back to us. I began with the title and then the first lines of the stanza. There is so much I could tell you if I felt like it, which I do less and less. I used to verbalize at a mile a minute, but I've had to give it up. I speak the words slowly so the music of them will wash over me, so that my thinking mind, my judging mind is lulled by the vibration of the words. I allow the art in, that stage I spoke of, the mind's heart to receive the poem. And then I continue. They used to ask me all kinds of questions. Will I get a good husband? Will I be rich? Will the baby recover? And so on. Now it's only the one thing. Is there no hope? They ask that over and over, though the sky is blue as ever, the flowers as flowery. They stand back, slack-mouthed, arms hanging useless, as if the earth is about to crumble, as if there is no safe refuge. Of course, I say. I hate to disappoint. Of course there's hope. It's over there, in that well. There's an endless supply. Bend over the rim, you'll see. Down there, it looks like silver. It looks like you, with the sun behind your head, as if your brain is burning. The dark face without features, but that's a trick of the light. That's hope. It's in the future tense. Don't be deceived. At this last line, the female bald eagle, or Formel, or Jackie, as the humans have named her, sings again. I suppose the singing is more commonly called a cry, but to cry implies something different to me. Jackie's tone is conversational and affirming. She seems to be in agreement with what I have just read. I make note and mark the page. Exposition. Of course, there exists a cry as well, those sounds made that beg our attention. Right now, there seem to be so many, and to attend to all of them would be futile. So I turn to the cries that I think I can address or assuage, the ones I suppose I know something about. And one in particular. The cry from poets and non-poets alike, the one that asks why. Why do I continue to write, to make poems, when it doesn't seem to matter? Act 1, duty. Not so many years ago, when I was a young poet, I approached the podium to give a talk about cowboys and Indians to a large group of listeners in Missoula, Montana. In front of me were nearly 100 non-native listeners, behind me a row of powerful native women, and humble, non-native Western men. I looked at the audience, then opened my mouth, and nothing came. I shuffled my papers, cleared my throat, and tried again. Nothing. On the paper were my thoughts clearly outlined, my greeting, my introduction, and my heart, what I hoped to deliver about the myth and mythos of the relationship between Indians and cowboys, but the words were stuck behind what seemed like a dozen other voices trying to speak. In the end, it was all I could do to recite what I had written, never deviating from the page, as if I was merely the transmitter. The following spring, I went to Nambe Pueblo for festival days. At lunch, I sat across from a Pecuri elder named Kelly. Over fry bread and between conversations happening around us, I told him what had happened that day in Missoula. Granddaughter, he said, his voice soil and granite. That was your aunties, your grandmothers and grandfathers, your cousins and sisters, all trying to speak. They saw the opening and wanted to tell their story. My ancestors, and likely yours and some more recent than others, were not allowed to tell their stories, were sometimes, maybe more often than we would like to admit, threatened with violence if they wrote or even spoke, particularly if they did so in their own language. They grew quiet and then silent, and in the worst scenarios, complacent. I asked Kelly what I should do. How could I honor them? He gave me a word to say to them, a word in the old language, the same word that warriors spoke before they went into battle. a word that evokes the feminine and particularly the traits of compassion and empathy. He gave me a word that gave both me and my ancestors permission. If you are here today, it is likely because at some point you were called to write. You felt compelled, and that compulsion was more than a passing fancy, something to fill the hours that are already full of so much else. Now, we write because there lives within us the voices that could not speak. We write because there are lives that are asking us to tell their stories. We write because we have to. It is no luxury, as Audre Lorde says. These places of possibility within ourselves are dark because they are ancient and hidden. They have survived and grown strong through darkness. Within these deep places, each one of us holds an incredible reserve of creativity and power, of unexamined and unrecorded emotion and feeling. The woman's place of power within each of us is neither white, nor black, nor surface. It is dark, it is ancient, and it is deep. I think about, I just want to take a break there and have you think about what it took for you to get here. And I don't mean the drive from Portland or from wherever you may have come across campus. I mean, imagine who had to survive for you to be born. We have it pretty easy right now, but there have been plagues and wars and entire decimations of people. And yet here you are because of the survivors that came before you, because of those voices that are so within you. And that's something to honor. It wasn't easy for you to get here. We write because in us is the capacity to do so, and outside is not only the audience, but the freedom to write and speak. If you have been called to write or to writing, it is your duty to show up for all those who could not, who cannot, and to use this gift, to go to this well, to address the oracle and listen to what she has to offer you. Poetry is not a luxury. It is not a hobby. It is, if you are called to it, a moral imperative. Even now, especially now, when it seems too late, when it seems that those who most need to hear you never will. The German writer Joseph Roth argued that even if defeat was certain, resistance was a moral imperative, a way to defend one's dignity and the sanctity of the truth. He insisted that one must write, even when one realizes the printed word can no longer improve anything. One must write because we have a duty to our ancestors, but also to those who will come after. Those on the other end of the tether that Stephanie spoke of last night. When I read to the eagles in the morning, I am also reading to their progeny. There's 3 eggs under this. Have you seen them yet? They showed you there? Okay. I am also writing to their progeny, to the generations not yet born. I write to this same future. Act 2, to feel less alone. Yesterday, a raven was seemingly harassing Jackie as she sat on her and Shadow's 3 eggs. The black-cloaked deacon came closer and closer to the nest, and Jackie spread her wings, making of herself a large feathered umbrella. Raven grew closer, no doubt thinking of her own prodigy in their nest or soon to be, and began gargling a caw of conversation, as if saying, "You know why I'm here. You know what it takes for us to survive." It is an ancient relationship in a language I am not privy to, and yet I understood. But Jackie was not about to give up her position, and she knew that she did not have to protect her eggs alone. She turned her beak to the sky, and from that golden morning sun, she cried out. She called. And then There was silence. And so again, she opened that golden beak, and the sky and frame split as shadow dove into the picture, and Raven exploded from view. With her cry to shadow, Jackie reminded me of an untruth and a power of poetry. But first, another story. Recall the neighbors who I read to in the morning, the human ones? The ones who, days after purchasing their cabin near ours, began what they called clearing. They wanted more space, they claimed, for a garage to house their motorized things, for parking, for, too, the sky. Every day, more trees fell. Trees I had come to know intimately by watching their inhabitants, both avian and not, fill their bark with seed, sing from their limbs, bore holes, and bore more holes looking for those first dwellers. I knew these pines from watching their crowns sway in the wind, their limbs gather and release snow. I enjoyed their shade in the summer and the dry ground they offered in winter. Listening to the chainsaw and then these living beings fall, their limbs reaching out a final time to brace them and protect the ground. I knew then the sound that losing makes. It was without grace when I cried out to those wielding the saws that if they came any closer to the trees we call ours, I would resist. And it was in anger that I placed notes on the new neighbor's door, alerting them to my feelings about the destruction they were causing. I asked if we might meet, that I could tell them about the beings that lived in these woods they were about to inhabit, and hoping that knowing them would change this practice. Or perhaps their children might change a future practice and protect the habitat the trees and shrubs create. But the notes and requests went unanswered. Feeling helpless and under attack, I cried out. And just as shadow had arrived at the nest, grace found me. It came in the form of a poem from my friend Tess Gallagher. Choices. I go to the mountainside of the house to cut saplings and clear a view to the snow on the mountain. But when I look up, saw in hand, I see a nest clutched in the uppermost branches. I don't cut that one. I don't cut the others either. Suddenly, in every tree, an unseen nest where a mountain would be. I read that poem over and over until it became me. And then I wrote it over and over on thin paper, and I placed the words on every stump the saws left on the neighbor's 2 acres. This time, it was not done in anger alone, but in anger and love. For if poetry teaches us anything, it teaches us that 2 things can be true at once. I do not know if my neighbors read the poems, and I have no regret for littering, but I do know that when I tilted my head back and called out, my call was answered. In her way and through her poems, Tess was saying, "You're not alone." And she was saying, "You do not have to do this alone." And so then did I realize that I might have something to say to others that would make them feel less alone. And so I wrote an essay about the loss and sent it out into the world, bypassing the neighbor's door as I did, trusting the message simply was not for them. In a culture that lauds the do-it-yourselfer, writers may believe that their work is solitary, that to write is to be alone. But this way of thinking, slathered on by our culture, has left us feeling even more alone and believing in that loneliness. The rugged individualism that has been so long held up as the ideal is the cancer that is killing our communities. This me culture tries to convince us that we are alone in what we are doing, but it's simply not true. Bill McKibben, The writer and environmentalist says the most important thing an individual can do is to be a little less of an individual. I write because it is very lonely in this flesh I call my body. And writing is my way of connecting with all of you, and despite what my culture tells me, I can't and don't want to do this work on my own. A popular phrase among us all right now is, I know I'm just singing to the choir. I'm not sure why that phrase has a tinge of indignation and is felt as bad or a worthless thing to do, because the beauty of a choir is that its members are singing the same song. That together the song continues, and so when one voice needs a rest, the song does not stop. In a choir, you can give rest and receive it. I come to poetry because I want to sing with all the others who have come before. I want to add my particular tone to the song or subject. I come to poetry because it cannot live without community and because it creates community. The wonderful thing about communities is that the work is shared. No one has to do it alone. That said, poetry also reminds us to be small, and it gives us permission to do small things. Act 3, the power of smaller. Reading to Jackie in shadow has become a bit of a metaphor. It cannot go unnoticed that the bald eagle, for better and for worse, have been made into a symbol for our nation. And at least in my house, that nation feels chaotic. And there were days before knowing them intensely, before reading to them daily, Jackie in shadow, not unlike our American flag, started to feel like something being used against me and people like me. That is to say, people who do not see either the flag or the eagles as belonging to one group or another. My morning reading is only 20 minutes. I set a timer. There is so much else the day demands. Only 20 minutes of poems, and then I write one poem after. It's something I love about poetry, concision. That so much can happen in the tiny fist of a poem. Poems thrive on their littleness. That's not to say that epic poems haven't sailed ships, but the beauty of the common poem, and I mean that in the most loving way, is its smallness, is the small space it takes up to read and write. We can memorize poems. We can tattoo them on our bicep. Their smallness gives us permission to do small things. That compared to all that is happening, small things are all we can do. This permission helps to avoid another cultural manifestation that can beleaguer our gifts and creation of art, the martyrdom complex. The complex wherein a poet may believe that they must sacrifice everything, even their craft, to prove or perhaps validate their existence. A culture that tells them that nothing is great enough save for the sacrifice of the self. Imagine a raindrop that thought it had to be the whole flood, or a single tear that had to hold all the joy or sadness, or either of those not coming together to raise, as it is said, all ships. And when I need a friend to remind me of the power of small acts, of raindrops, I turn to Kim Stafford and this poem, Advice from a Raindrop. You think you're too small to make a difference? Tell me about it. You think you're helpless, at the mercy of forces beyond your control? Been there. Think you're doomed to disappear, just one small voice among millions? That's no weakness. Trust me. That's your wild card, your trick, your implements. They won't see you coming until you're there, in their faces, shining, festive, expendable, eternal. Sure, you're small. Just one small part of a storm that changes everything. That's how you win, my friend. Again and again and again. Act 4. Reading and writing poems helps me see the world and myself in all our complexity and beauty. You write in order to change the world, claims the great James Baldwin, knowing perfectly well that you probably can't, but also knowing that literature is indispensable to the world. The world changes according to the way people see it, and if you alter, even but a millimeter, the way people look at reality, then you can change it. I would go even further and say that, at least for me, I write to change myself. I told you I read poems every morning, but also I write that one, just that one. It follows time spent in connection with the greater universe and in connection with the universe of words. It has become habit, ritual, almost automatic, because I'm responding not only to what might subconsciously be waiting in my mind, but to the inspiration of whoever I'm reading. I don't think about it. I simply open my journal and write what comes. It is as if the poem has something to teach me before it can go on to offer anything to anyone else. All the while writing this, I have had Jackie and Shadow in the background. I'm usually protective of disruption, turning off devices and notifications so that I may get lost in words. And all the while I have been thinking about the distractions that I cannot turn off. I cannot turn off the threats of defunding artists and artist grants and the Department of Education. My partner, a U.S. Forest Service biologist who waits every day for an email to come, as they have come for his colleagues dismissing him, firing him from his work protecting salmon habitat. I cannot turn off the knowledge that these actions are effectively disabling the stewards of public lands and making them vulnerable to being sold off to the mega-rich for development and private use. And I leave it on. And I let it come into my poetry, as I did a couple of weeks ago when Caleb received the now infamous Fork in the Road email. I asked my beloved if he knows how snowflakes are made. And then, without waiting for a reply, I explained the particle of dust which is hanging out in the atmosphere waiting to attract a water particle. And when it does, how it begins a six-sided metamorphosis. I don't know, I tell him, why snowflakes always become hexagons. We had been talking about the email he received a few days earlier, and I thought myself clever, changing the subject, trying to distract us from plans we would have to make if the very government he worked for, the career he spent his college years preparing for, gave 26 years of his life for, forced him to separate. Each of the six sides, I explained, collects water droplets, and these form the arms of the snowflake, which then grow independently. He says nothing, but gives me the quiet attention I now give the bald eagle couple hatching their 3 eggs on a nest, live streamed on the internet, news of the real. He had explained days earlier the content of the letter, and now he had until February 6th, which is tomorrow, to decide if he would resign or risk a forced separation. For years, he has worked in fisheries, particularly in protecting the habitat of endangered and threatened species such as salmon and bull trout, and now one eagle has brought the other a trout. And they are exchanging a morning greeting which seems harsh and raspy, but what do I know of eagles and their language? We know that despite our choices and our comfortable nest, we will not be fine if forced to separate. We will not be fine if our neighbors are forced to leave, if neighbors don't have a meal in their freezer. I tell him that the dust particle which has attracted the moisture and become a hexagon in his growing arms is now heavily falling through the atmosphere, and the conditions it meets will add feathers to the arms which will cause it to fall more slowly, like stars with tiny parachutes. and land atop the million others which have fallen and are still here and will still be our neighbors. Each one of those millions unique, I say. Can you imagine? He pauses, like he has done since receiving the email, and says, this is how rain forms too, though maybe it becomes a cloud first. We don't finish the conversation about next steps and the 4 pillars and how the sun will eventually melt the 5 feet of snow now surrounding our home. Instead, we stare at the bald eagle on her nest, who stares at a setting sun, which is glowing orange through dust and soot and prayers, and dreams of a republic where any minute now the snow may turn to rain. So much happened inside of me when I wrote that poem. I released anger and fear. I reaffirmed what my relationship with Caleb means. I understood better the ways that I see the eagles and my connection to nature and her many lessons. I took the poem under my own wing and nurtured it a bit, and then shared it first with Caleb and later with publishers. It went from a gift I gave myself to a gift I made for others. A very small gift. A small ray of love and a small fist against the tyranny that before writing the poem, I felt I had no voice against. Where it goes from here is no longer up to me, but I made it, and I put it in the world as one small gesture, but gesture enough. Act 5. I write to reinforce my belief in the power of words. Adrienne Rich writes, I can't write a poem to manipulate you. It will not succeed. Perhaps you have read such poems and decided you don't care for poetry. Something turned you away. I can't write a poem from dishonest motives. It will betray its shoddy provenance. Like an ill-made tool, a scissors, a drill, it will not serve its purpose. It will come apart in your hands at the Cornish dress. I can't write a poem simply from good intentions, wanting to set things right, make it all better. The energy will leak out of it. It will end by meaning less than it says. I can't write a poem to transcend my own limits, though poetry has often pushed me beyond old horizons, and writing a poem has shown me how far out a part of me was walking beyond the rest. I can expect a reader to feel my limits as I cannot, in terms of her or his own landscape, to ask, but what has this to do with me? Do I exist in this poem? And this is not a simple or naive question. We go to poetry because we believe it has something to do with us. We also go to poetry to receive the experience of the not me, enter a field of vision we could not otherwise apprehend. Someone writing a poem believes in a reader, in readers of that poem. The who of the reader quivers like a jellyfish. Self-reference is always possible, that my I is a universal we, that the reader is my clone. That sending letters to myself is enough for attention to be paid, that my chip of mirror contains the world. But most often someone writing a poem believes in, depends on, a delicate, vibrating range of difference, that I can become we without extinguishing others. That a partly common language exists to which strangers can bring their own heartbeat, memories, images. A language that itself has learned from the heartbeat, memories and images of strangers. Beth Ann Fennelly speaks to this in her poem, Ars Poetica, excerpted from Telling the Gospel Truth, when the speaker becomes teacher and student. The next time a student asks how I become a writer, I will say, sit in a white room without paper. And think of the poacher who shot the wing off the bald eagle, who must have seen he wrecked his trophy, and disgusted, did not offer it a second bullet, but thrashed off deeper into the forest, wearing his expensive forest-colored clothes. Then, think of the man from the wild bird sanctuary who found the eagle, sutured its ragged wing stub, fed the awkward hopping thing for years, and before it died, harnessed it in a hang glider and took it to the mountain. So one last time, its hollow bones could float. So one last time, its eyes could scour the forest floor from hunter's height. So one last time, its talons could tear the gauzy cloak of sky, flying in the face of God. That one last time. Think of the poacher. Think of the birder. Alternate, shortening the intervals. Do not forget to breathe. When you can hold both of these men in the palm of your mind at the same time, love, come find me and teach me. And so first, my poems teach me. Then I send them out to do whatever work they will in the world. And sometimes that work is teaching, sometimes permission, sometimes it is singing to and in the choir. And maybe someday these artifacts will speak out from the beyond as reminders. You might not consider the late Ed Abbey a poet, but certainly you would agree that his writing and life were poetic. A year ago, my friend took me to the place where Ed is buried. Doug had a gift for Abby, and I had gratitude I wanted to share. There was an orb weaver spider weaving her web above Ed's grave as if his mind was still working, still sending his thoughts into this world. I watched her create, and then I watched the web vibrate, its strands delicate and strong, as if they were not just the sticky things of capture, but the gossamer of song. And this year, I heard them reflected in the following passage, a speech he delivered before a gathering of environmental activists who were perhaps also folks like yourself. It is not enough to fight for the land. It is even more important to enjoy it while you can, while it's still here. So ramble out yonder and explore the forest, climb the mountains, bag the peaks, run the rivers, breathe deep of that yet sweet and lucid air. Sit quietly for a while and contemplate the precious stillness, the lovely, mysterious, and awesome space. Enjoy yourselves. Keep your brain in your head and your head firmly attached to the body active and alive. And I promise you this much. I promise you this one sweet victory over our enemies, over those desk-bound men and women with their hearts in a safe deposit box and their eyes hypnotized by desk calculators. I promise you this. You will outlive the bastards. Which brings me to the final act, the sixth reason why I write, even when it seems it doesn't matter. Pleasure. I know what I've offered you so far seems simple, and it is, but it is not without nuance. My work and my writing are a continued effort to decolonize and deconstruct a way of thinking that the overculture has continued to employ to at once control and destabilize community. And quite frankly, it gives me extreme pleasure. Writing and reading poems gives me pleasure. Reading to the eagles and watching the movement of the tiniest feather on Shadow's back lift and relax with the breeze gives me pleasure. Sharing my gifts and my time with my community, with you, gives me pleasure. Gives me joy. And joy is no small thing. Bertolt Brecht writes, in the dark times will there also be singing. Yes, there will also be singing about the dark times. But in that singing, there will also be light, because The light we have can never be taken from us, is a renewable resource that can never be drained. It is joy. And as my friend Drew Lanham writes in the following poem, it is the justice we give ourselves. Joy is the justice we give ourselves. It is Maya's bird, sung free. Yes, exactly. Yes, you love this poem. It is Maya's bird, sung free past the prison bars, holding spirits bound without due process, without just cause. Joy is the steady running stream, rights sprung up from mossed soft ground, under hanging trees, nourished by blood, grown through pain, now seeping sweet, equality's demands made clear from sea to shining sea, north to south, west to east, fly over heartland in between. Joy is the truth, the crooked lies hammered straight, whitewashed mist wiped away. Joy is Stone Mountain, just stone, Rushmore, no more. Joy is giving the eagles their mountains back. Joy is returning to sacred the people's holy lands. Joy is the paradise we claim right here, right now. No vengeful gods craving prayer, no tenth and tithes to pay. No repenters cover charge, no dying required to get in. Joy is the sunrise, breaking through the night's remains. Shone new on a shell-racked shore, a fresh tide scrubbed world. Redeem what was to is. Joy is the soul underneath the journey, gaze snagged on wonder, not knowing final destination, yet blessed as witness moored to ground. Joy is worshipful tears dripped into grateful smile. Joy is being loved up close, not just from the untouchable distances or at arm's length, for who we are or might become. Joy is us mattering. Joy is equity, not equivocation. Joy is actually seeing color, hue, not blinded by privilege, the piety of claiming you don't. Joy is James Baldwin's grin. Joy is the generations come before surviving the struggle, somehow staying strong in the midst of withering storms, from shackled ancestors through Jim Crow back doors to gerrymandered chokeholds. Joy is the thriving of a people who won't die in the midst of all this dying. Joy is the mind beyond the skull box, not wasted on convention or what they said was right. Joy is the maybe, the possibilities of empathy between strangers. You can put the word poem in place of joy in this, and it's just as beautiful. Poem is the maybe, the possibilities of empathy between strangers. Joy is the prairie where billowed clouds and wild grass meet, where the soaring hawks glide from here to there, wherever. Its own choice to make. No border crossing checks. Joy is the surrender of faith, of push, to trust and lift, giving over to Sister Tony's command to ride the air, to float on a wish. Joy is the gift that we deserve without asking or demands when no one else really cares. Joy is the reward, the pay we have earned, the day off just because we can. Joy is silly, serious. Joy is the trivial, the tiny. Joy is enormous. Joy is the murmuration. It is our stillness. Joy is the inexplicable coincidence. Joy is what was meant to be. Maybe the absurd. Occasionally, joy is genius. What I mean to say to you is that joy is a song. Joy is that leaky bucket that lets me sometimes carry the song. But what I intend for us, our claim, that joy is the justice we must give ourselves. Coda. It makes no difference, I suppose, that I read to these nesting bald eagles. I am told that Jackie and Shadow likely have no idea that the camera is there, that at any one time, 5,000 to 10,000 people are watching them. Then again, maybe what Mary Oliver says is true, that attention is the beginning of devotion, and that devotion, which at its core means prayer, means love, is the beginning of poetry. And if we pay attention to that call, not the cry that says our words don't matter, but the call that is asking for our attention, that is cooing to us, that is singing to us from somewhere beyond, if we pay attention to that call, something like devotion might rise, and within that, love. We might start to understand the importance of our words, and our devotion to them can become prayer. We may begin to see how poetry can form community, that we do not have to be and are not alone. We will give ourselves permission to be small and to do small acts. We will cry and sing out to others from now and before. We will honor the call within us to write, to uphold writers. We will honor our ancestors and fulfill our duty. We will speak to the word that gives us permission, that begins to create the world we want to see. And in doing all of this, we will understand that writing does make a difference, that our voices do matter, that poems can be the justice and the joy we give ourselves. They are acts of resistance and of love that we offer back to a world that has gifted us so much. Thank you. You all can tune in anytime, friendsofbigbearvalley.org, and watch. And I think, is there a black patch? I think this is Shadow, so it's daddy duty right now, as they call it. He's taking over. I intentionally left some time at the end conversation. If you all would like to talk for a few minutes, if you have questions. We have this wonderful chance to be in community together. Yes.
I don't know when your poem was written, but how's your husband? What's the news today?
Today he is living up what Edward Abbey said to do, and he took our little Apache dog camping. So they're somewhere in a place called Pittsburgh Landing in Hell's Canyon. But so far, each email leaves him with a job, but again, it's so complicated, right? Because we're seeing our neighbors lose their jobs. And I was talking to Juniper about this morning. Everybody's like, well, you guys will be fine. I have a job. We've made some good choices. We have a home. We don't have children, so there's only us to care for. But my friends, we cannot be fine when our neighbors are not fine. We cannot be fine when people are losing their jobs and the stewards of the land are no longer there to protect it. So I think that it's this mixed blessing that he almost doesn't want to feel lucky to have his job, because he feels in some ways that he's also leaving behind people that he has fought a very good battle with. So it's complicated, but so far. He's also 4 years from retirement, which makes him low-hanging fruit right now for Musk and his folks. He would like to see that 30 years out there. He would, yeah.
I know that you brought, I have to have it out, you have your book here,
I do.
and you have, your podcast and all these different things. So how about if you tell us a little bit about your book, that somebody doesn't have other comments about the essays, so
Yeah.
just thought it might be a good thing to.
Yeah, I suck at self-promotion. I read other people's poems, but I'll tell you a little bit about salmon weather and give a little credit to Caleb. When I first moved to Idaho, and we'll talk about this in class today, if you come to the workshop. I hated winter. I hated it. Like, and we have winter. And we've got 5.5 feet of snow on the ground right now, and that'll stay there till April. And then it'll be mud season. We have about 3 months of non-snowy weather. And it's a good thing I left him. But but I found it inconvenient. Snow was so inconvenient. I had to scrape it off the car. If the roads were closed, I couldn't go where I wanted to go. We had to put chains on tires sometimes. It was cold, or it was any number of things. And then one day Caleb said, "But this is salmon weather." I said, "What do you mean?" And he goes, "Without the snow, without these deep reservoirs of snow, the salmon can't come home. This is their weather." And it made me realize how incredibly selfish I have been, which I every day am reminded of. Wanting things, and this is a problem of our society, I think, too, right? We want things to be convenient for us as humans, but it was not convenient for the salmon. And so then every time it started snowing, and not just salmon, mind you, these cold water refugia, these areas of snowmelt that'll happen in July and August, the rise of the water, the overall temperature, which has gone up over 70 degrees in the last couple of years. These snow reservoirs help keep it cool. And so now every time it snows, I say, "Oh, it's salmon weather." And I find myself going, "Come on, snow some more. Let's have record snowfall." And it's 10 below or 15 below. And I'm fine with that because it means the snow is going to stay until April or May. And so salmon weather became the perfect title for a collection of essays that is looking at not only what's happening to the landscape, particularly in the region I live in the Frank Church Wilderness of No Return, or River of No Return Wilderness, but also what's happened to Native people, particularly Native women, and how there's a parallel between the loss of Native bodies and the loss of species, and what that means and looks like from a Native perspective.
Thank you, Sarah.
Yeah, thank you.
She brought a lot of books with her, and she doesn't have to take them back on the plane. That's why I wanted to actually.
Everyone that throws my carry-on up. Hi.
Marie, thank you so much. It was a beautiful, beautiful thought. I was so moved when you told the anecdote of stepping up to the microphone, a prepared speech, and just being speechless. And you told that to an elder, and the elder, I think you said, gave you a word.
Mm-hmm.
I don't suppose that's a word you could share.
It is not. And I'm not trying to be coy or anything, but I think that there are just certain traditions and words and gifts that stay within a community, and I don't feel I have permission to share that. But I do have an exercise I do with students when they're looking for that word, and that is to not in the same way I needed to seek permission, but to imagine what your poems or your writing or yourself can do in the world, and picture that world. Picture it deeply. Close your eyes as if in meditation, and picture it and hold it there and see what it looks like and what it feels like and smells like and tastes like. And right before you open your eyes, a word comes to you. And I feel that ancestrally becomes yours, where a word I might give you, like Kotsiyakia or Tlatsmewi, isn't going to mean to you what it is going to mean to my DNA. Thank you for asking. Thank you. Yeah. Ask it. When asked to write, did you all ever listen to NPR's This I Believe? It was a series. It might still be on, but it was a series that was really popular, maybe in the 80s, 70s. And no, it wasn't Stegner. It was came from that same area. But his speech was, Everything potent is dangerous was this, I believe. And he says every time you're asked to write one of these, you come up with like, I better have something to say. And every time I write, I start in a journal, because that journal to me is just the place where the journal and I have been talking for years. Nobody's ever going to read it. It's password protected. Hopefully when I die, it dies in some forensic whatever. Doesn't want to get in there, because believe me, you don't want to hear about fat days and gray hairs for months on end. But it's a place where I feel like I can start. And when asked to write this, I knew I was going to be speaking to you all, and I thought, how do I know what we need to hear right now as poets? And I kept writing to something. And my writing kept pulling me back. Y'all experienced that, where you're like, I'm going to write a poem about, about a bald eagle. And the poem's like, that's not really what you want to write about. And so this piece became more and more of a struggle between me and where the piece wanted to go. And the more I got to know what was coming out of this and what my intuition was saying your intuition might need to hear, the more I came back to community. Everything in here, every poem is about community. And I can't underscore enough how much we need each other. How much we have to come together. The writer, do y'all know Deborah Magpie Erling's work? Lost Journals of Sacagawea and Permared. We were talking about how what's going on right now, COVID started it, but what's happening now is this descent, this isolation, this thinking that we need to do it by ourselves. I have students that are like, poetry's never going to make a difference. It's not enough. And environmental activists that are just like, I'm going to, I need to put my body in this place, in that sense of martyrdom that I talked about. And that hurts, because writing is what I do, and that hurts because James Baldwin, Toni Morrison, Linda Hogan, who gifted me this beautiful wrap to wear today, have meant so much to me and are in me and have lifted me up. And so I felt like everything was saying, continue to come together, that you don't have to do this alone, and furthermore, you don't want to. That we feel like we're all speaking into this room where all these voices are happening, but it is a song, and your job is to keep that song going. To not isolate yourself, to not romanticize that isolated, lonely author thing that has gone on way too long. Because I look over there at JP and I think of how many of their poems I have read that have influenced my poems and lifted me up out of moments of darkness. I look at so many of you that have been in my communities in different ways, and I cannot be here without you. We have to come together, and I think that's the biggest message, that whatever you believe in as inspiration or creativity, that my ancestors, that those tethered great-grandchildren that have not been born yet are trying to say to us. Don't fall apart. Stick together. Are you hungry? Thank you so much.
Thank you, C. Marie. Thank you very, very much. That's very terrific. Let's stretch our legs. There's more coffee and stuff out there. I think there's some whatevers out there. Different breads or whatever. And in 15 minutes, we're going to have Armand Rizzo. And so stretch your legs, and we'll be back here in about 15 minutes. Well, soon as Juan said you had a book out, I said, well, we got to go to mine. So yeah, we're live streaming this. We're live streaming the break here. Forget me about just. This morning. And he was there Thursday. Yeah. So.
She's going to be speaking Corvallis.
Sí, ¿sabes qué? De hecho, si quieres un comercial en español, pues puedes agregar en español. Aunque no tengamos la traducción, pues ya tenemos varios. Como te sientas cómodo. Yo diría que así como bien.
No, not here. I'm a Portland alum, yeah. Just recently graduated, but. Oh, no, you're totally right.
Colette? Would you like a button? Did I already give you a button?
No, I didn't.
I finally got more made, so yes.
I feel like I look like I'm getting ready to leave. I think yes.
You'll do the Eugene event.
I don't know. Will you see him regularly? I'll see us. I'll see us. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I can get right there. So if you want to so sorry, I'm not doing that. I was just stop by Starbucks before I came here. Everybody else is behind. Be the same.
Lex, see you. Yay. I asked him.
Basically, lying awake for half the night, writing a bunch of stuff in my head. Sticking some things together. About an hour before I left to go down there, I read it to Kim, my wife, who's the editor, and she said, she said, present tense is this evening work. So I got back to the computer, did that for about 30 minutes, and got that all scrubbed and away we went. And I walked in there. And I said,
Yeah, I need to grow. I need to grow.
so is it happy or sad?
Well, I need to know.
That's all I need to know.
I said,
Well,
well,
just my tuning.
it's kind of both. But it was an amazing, just an amazing experience. And we had fun doing the first thing together, but that one just absolutely blew my mind. I just clung to it. I can't let it go.
Improvisation.
And it's I'll talk about this a little bit more. I tread water here. Just get this, it's a little known fact when I was 19 years old. All I did was
Thank you. It's one of my favorites. I don't know. I actually kind of forgot about it. Yeah.
That's a classic improvisation.
You're getting the whole
I'm so grateful that music has come back to me. I didn't have to do that. Anyway, it's been really fun. So, Dawn's really enjoyed the nature gratitude. We've got folks. We really been going a lot recently to the Eric's been collaborating. We have a pianist, yeah. So anyway, we just got finished talking. Shelby, bless you. Working so hard on it.
It's good. It's cool to be practiced.
Yeah. It's just amazing.
So, music live stream. Everything right now. It is on Salem Poetry Festival.
awesome. So I can publish my bill later. Because I didn't have my notebook before, and I came up with like, I'm like, yeah, that sounds about like a thing I would do.
Yeah. In fact, I was up here. It was, but I didn't grab her.
Oh, yeah.
We could read it, so I agreed to that. Long before, so it was taken.
I did. I watched it. Wow. It was good.
Amazing. That's just astonishing.
Yeah, Mark as a force. Keeps it going.
Refill?
I'm good. Thanks.
Are you going to read his biography?
I have the English version,
Yeah. Can you?
so I got it. But if you want to do it in Spanish, you can.
Yeah. I will do the Spanish or the English or whatever. So, but what is the?
Okay.
You're going to introduce us or?
Yeah. I'll take it. Yeah. So I'll introduce you.
Yeah.
Yeah, once you introduce us and then can you read the English biography? You're talking whatever, and I will introduce him and also read the biography in Spanish.
Thank you. Yeah, so it's Stevie Bagels. That's the name of the post. It got the name because Dr. Lee used to buy bagels for the group. And they were different. And so they got the name Stevie Bagels. This was before my time, but so they can see the bagels. I was there, and I don't know what now, right? It just was your last
Nice.
I was creating writing, I was just straight English, I was English communication, but I started doing graphic design, and it kind of played a little bit myself, like straight up puritanical communication writing,
As soon as Juan gets back, we're gonna get going again. All right, Juan. He's coming. All right, here we go. So we got, we have, I know that we are kind of overshadowed. That's fine. I think that we'll leave the Eagles in for this. So but we do have our next reader. So and let me just, I think I'm gonna have Juan Cervantes, who is a contact that I use for, I use a contact for Spanish language poetry, and I appreciate Juan. And when I asked Juan, who could we bring? And he said, well, Herman has a book. And I said, oh, I love Herman, so let's have Herman. So let me just give you the intro, the English intro, and then I'll turn it over to Juan. Herman Rizzo is a Mexican poet and narrator. He has published Songs of My Soul and Life, Under the Heart's Shadow, Dazzle Me to You, Traces After the Rain, and a blind bird comes out of my mouth. His poetry has appeared in several poetry anthologies: Opposing Balances, a tribute to Federico Garcia Lorca, Oregon Anthology of Oregon Poetry, the anthology Making Art with Words. So that's the English version. Here you go.
Hello, everyone. Well, I'm so happy to be here, and I'm going to be helping Herman. He's going to read his poetry in Spanish. Herman has published several books and also anthologies. We have worked together for about 15 years doing the Spanish poetry in Oregon. So please give an applause to Herman Rizzo.
Thank you. Gracias por acompañarnos. Gracias por el recibimiento.
Thank you for coming. Thank you.
So Herman is going to read in Spanish, and then I will read the English version of his poem.
Wow. Amé la inavertida hoguera de tu noche, la caída de tu desnudez, los ojos entrelazados en un solo gesto, y amé la lluvia, las profundidades de tus venas. Me asomé al dulce vientre que alimentó mi dolor, al tiempo disfrazando la eternidad. Amé el prodigio disipado en la luz de tus llanuras, regocijo solar, cascada inevitable donde agitados lienzos escapaban hacia la repentina promesa. Tierra dorada tu cuerpo, donde el deseo es un largo olvido.
I love the unnoticed bonfire of your night, the fall of your nakedness, our eyes amalgamated in a single gesture, and I love the rain in the depths of your veins. I'm wandering into the sweet belly that fed my pain, into the time while disguising eternity. I love the dissipated prodigy in the light of your plains, solar rejoicing, inevitable waterfall where agitated canvases escape towards the sudden promise. Golden land your body where desire is alone oblivion.
El amor lo aprendimos a oscuras y aprendimos a recorrer el fervor hechizado, simulando despedidas antes que la locura fuera vulnerable a nuestro espejismo. Y yo aprendí tu risa, ese velo de sombras que se abría entre los arrecifes, y aprendí la melodía, la locura de la llama que anidó entre tus muslos. En los campos fértiles de tu cuerpo, la ansiedad era un vértigo a destiempo.
We learned love in the dark, and we learned to navigate the enchanted fervor, pretending farewells before madness was vulnerable to our mirage. And I learned your laughter, that veils of shadows that open between the rifts. I learned the melody, the madness of the flame that nested between your thighs. In the fertile fields of your body, anxiety was a vertigo out of time.
Contemplo el frío en el amanecer de los sauces. No puedo hablar. En mi voz se acumula un cántaro. Un trueno empuña la lluvia. El galope de la llama sangrante.
I contemplate the cold in the dawn of the willows. I cannot speak, in my voice accumulates a hug. A thunder grabs the rain in the gallop of the bleeding flame. So these three poems is mostly talking about love, about the dawn, the evenings and the nights when you're missing or contemplating the beauty of a woman, comparing with the nature, like a metaphor.
En ese brote de gaviotas atravieso la pureza de tu sangre. Qué hermoso navío cuando se desploma en mis venas. Advierto una armonía de soles. Sobreviene un cauce, una emboscada de estíos para mi hambre.
I cross the purity of your blood. What a beautiful sheep when it falls in my veins. I see a harmony of suns. It comes a stream, an ambush of summers for my hunger.
Adolezco en tu desnudez, amor en tu oscuro vértigo, donde hechizas la luz, el rayo y las hojas que azotan la alegría de la lluvia. Leyenda que oculta el eco, tatuado en mi armonía. Amor germinando en mis besos, tu libertad despunta la nostalgia del otoño. Barcas que ondean en lo estéril de la espuma. Amor que salvas este deseo de todas las máscaras. Amor en su lenguaje solar, en su manía infinita, luz en la cordura del reloj, linaje audaz, en su ceguera tejiendo otros acordes. Amor hilando otra claridad, esos pedazos de lluvia en su abandono.
I suffer from your nakedness, love in your dark vertigo, where you bewitch the light, the rain, and the leaves that wipe down the the happiness of the rain. Legend that hides the echo tattooed in my harmony. Love germinating in my kisses. Your freedom sticks out from the false nostalgia. Barca waving over the stereo phone. Love, you say this desire from all the masks. Love on its solar language, on its endless mania. Light in the sanity of the clock, daring lineage on its blindness, needing another chord. Love suing a new clarity with pieces of rain in their solitude. Herman brought some of his books. If somebody wants to have them, we have these two titles, and this is the last one. Un pájaro ciego sale de mi boca. So this is just recently, and so this is we decided to bring Herman Rizzo to read one of his poems, which is this comes in the ones that he read comes in this book, and. ¿Quieres leer algo? Okay, now he's going to read one of these. We don't have the translation, but I will just say what is it about.
Tardes muertas florecen como fantasmas, interminables lazos subiendo por tus aguas. Ahora quiero escribir mientras los cuervos abortan las cenizas que un día escribieron el dolor de tantos ojos. Ahora abrazo el capítulo posado en la tumba y los hijos tiemblan despidiendo las palabras.
So this poem is called Tardes Muertas, like dead evenings, and it talks about like looking the shadows and the waters. Must be, you can imagine these waters from the river or the sea, and then he's writing while he sees some birds flying around, and but this poet is feeling some sadness, because he's kind of like in pain while he writes.
Bueno, un comentario sobre el camino que he recorrido en la poesía, que he publicado 5 libros, en cuales los libros han ido evolucionando. Cada libro es una nueva faceta en la poesía, con nuevas imágenes. Este último libro que estoy trabajando es un libro que le estoy haciendo un homenaje a una poeta argentina que se llama Alejandra Pizarnik. Se titula Hasta la paz de la oscuridad.
Right now, Herman, he has written until now 5 books of poetry, and he's just been trying different things with his poetry, and doing some poetry to honor some other poets. He has written about Garcia Lorca, like an anthology, and also right now his current book, he's working on a book where he's to honor Alejandra Pizarnik. She's an Argentinian writer.
Bueno, es que también empecé escribiendo desde muy pequeñito, y siempre empecé escribiendo poemas al amor y a la mujer, pero en el transcurso de los años ha ido mucho cambiando mi poesía. Ahorita escribo un poco un poquito más oscuro mi poema. Tengo unos poemas muy extensos, pero no encontré quién me hicieron la traducción. Muy ocupados los traductores.
So I've been writing since I was little, and I have some kind of long poems that I feel sorry that I couldn't have the translation today. Ya sé que los quieres leer un poema y luego ya acabamos. Ya, a veces hacemos un espacio para preguntas, como de 2 minutos. So he's gonna read one more, his last poem.
No quiero ser el del espejo, ni el fruto de narciso dibujado en el pasto. Me unto la sal, sus secretos de luz en el hastío, y las espinas a mi alrededor aún astillan la garganta. Aún mi silueta mendiga sobre el polvo, y adivino el milagro. La mujer que surge frente a mí, la reconozco en cada gota cuando me acerca su velo de pecados. Todo es negrura, olor a ruinas, hojas acariciando las gaviotas, y niego las siluetas que juntan mis silencios.
Okay, here the poet, he's trying to do the opposite of the Narciso that contemplates himself in the mirror, but he doesn't want to see himself in the mirror. And then also in his nostalgia, in his pain, he's kind of like trying to hurt himself somehow because he's using salt to hurt the pain to write poetry, I guess. Yeah, and then he mentions about the salt and the thorns and all these feelings, and then the dust also flowing. And then he sees a woman, probably like a sad woman that cries, and his tears look kind of more like a rain and covering the face of the girl. And then everything is just dark and beautiful because he's watching the birds flying around. And then everything just silence for a moment. So we're gonna take like 2 or 3 minutes for questions. If you wanna ask something, Herman, and then so we're open to listen to questions. Anything that you wanna ask?
Juan, who does the translations?
Good point. So these translations that we read, 1, 2 poems over. Okay. So all these poems that we read today, the translations did Arturo Sarmiento. So I don't know if some of you knows Arturo Sarmiento. He used to work at the radio station, and he has come to read on Thursday with the Salem Poetry. So, any questions? No questions? Yes.
Yeah, so where did you write these poems? Where were you?
Where was he?
Yeah.
Yeah. ¿De dónde estabas cuando escribías? O dónde escribías?
Solo estoy escrito aquí en Oregon.
Yeah, he's all these books that he has written, he has written his poetry here in Ireland.
For Spanish language poets, where did they have the opportunity to read?
Oh, okay. For the Spanish poetry, we do have a lot of different groups in Oregon. And like today, he has a reading later on today at 6 p.m. at the Café Cuban. It's like a Cuban coffee somewhere here in the city, by waterfront, I think it is. So Herman is in charge of, with Carmen, another poet, to organize these readings, which is every Saturday, the first day, the first Saturday of each month. And then also we have a group of poetry in Portland that we do once a month. And Mark also invite us to read sometimes. So these are basically where you can hear the Spanish poetry.
And so when you write your poetry in Spanish, you have all these incredible word choices, I think, maybe compared to English. And it's translated. How does it feel to hear the difference when the poem is then translated and read in English? Is there a feeling that you have about that?
¿Cuál es tu sentimiento o lo que piensas acerca de la traducción cuando se ve en inglés? De la traducción.
Yo creo que sí cambia un poco el impacto de las imágenes. Lo que puede cambiar la forma de traducir como que quiere decir esta calidez.
Yes, he said that he thinks that when he hears the translation, it's there's some like some feelings that are lost in the translations.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Okay, one more last question. No, or no question. You can say something. Efrain, you want to say something?
Oh no. I can make a comment about translations. I don't like to call them translations. I call them approximations.
Efraín está traduciendo un poema un poco largo.
And I want to say I also translated the poem. I forgot you remind me of you were in my home and anyway.
Yeah.
That's
So
another story.
Efrain has done some translations too for her mind. So
Él ha hecho otras traducciones para mí también.
yeah, and he has done translations before in some other poems that he has read before.
¿Cómo se llama?
Beer, he and also Beer from Silverman. He has helped us. Yes.
But it's also true, I think, that there are some words that are just not translatable.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, and that's probably true for any language in terms of, whatever language you translate. There's just some things you can't translate.
Yeah, exactly. That's why Frank uses the best word, approximation, because it's kind of like get close. In the other, sometimes it's just another form. This is very similar, I think, is when you read a poem, because each person finds their own way to interpret the poem. This is not about different language, it's about the same language, but that's how you do your interpretation about it. Because the interpretation comes from the experience. So Herman has, that's a good thing that he has experienced this dual language to hear his poems in English, and now we have him. Okay.
Thank you, Herman, and everyone, for that. Perfect, wonderful. A couple things. Our next workshop is if you see Marie. We're going to leave the Eagles up, unless she wants me to take them down. So we have about an hour before that happens. If you like, there's sandwiches and drinks and chips and stuff in the next room, so you can do that. Also, that's where the book table is. So Herman's got some books over there. Jennifer's got her books over there. See, Marie's got her books over there. And so, before you leave, certainly to go take a look at those books. I think Sarah roars or keeping track. So we'll take a break, stretch your legs, eat a sandwich, and then we'll see you back here at 1.